Hello, this is my week 3 discussion on communication cues. And I am going to start by just highlighting a few things that I read in the readings and then just some of my own thoughts on communication cues that I picked up through the studies. Um, Through globalization, we are having to become more well versed on other cultures and how to communicate and navigate within those cultures. We are no longer going to be able to just rely on someone else from another culture learning English. We are going to have to learn to assimilate in some respects to their culture and learn some of the nonverbal and verbal communication skills needed to effectively communicate in business settings and social settings. I read in the readings from Rahimi and Matthias that language is a part of culture. And I don't think that we always think of language as part of a culture. We also often think of other things such as customs or ceremonies or something like that, but not necessarily language. So that is something that we definitely have to begin to take into consideration. Multinationals have to learn how to communicate, and Charles wrote that in his. And I read that in his writing, and I think that's very important that we take the time and opportunity to learn the verbal and nonverbal communication cues and styles in other cultures, especially in business. I think that that's imperative so that we can function and operate effectively with our colleagues abroad. Nonverbal communication is a significant part of the culture in the UAE. They have a lot of nonverbal gestures and things that they interpret in very different ways than we do in Western culture. And so, as an expat operating or living in that culture, you would really have to know some of these cues and be very aware of them so that you don't create offense or come off too strong or aggressively. So, some of the gestures that I found that were very interesting, of course, greeting with a handshake is appropriate. But with that, you would not want to withdraw your hand too quickly. You let the other person withdraw first. And then no touching with the left hand. That hand is used for toilet function in that culture. So it's offensive to use your left hand when touching someone in that culture. Smiling is seen as insincere, so we might see it as friendly in our culture and as more making you more approachable, but in their culture they see that as insincere in some ways. So you definitely want to be aware of that as an expat, because you wouldn't want to go over there, too smiley might, seem a little flaky to another culture, to this culture in Dubai. Prolonged eye contact, they like that. It shows interest, it shows truthfulness. They see it as a sign of honesty. So prolonged eye contact is good. We like eye contact in our culture. It's similar. We get the same impressions from it. So that was interesting to learn. Some things to really be careful of non-verbally in their culture. The thumbs up, like we do this, that is offensive to them. It's an obscene insult to them. Kind of like if we, flip somebody the middle finger, they see that the same way, and it's very offensive to them. The next thing, pointing your index finger at someone in that culture would be very rude. And so if you were wanting to point to someone in that culture, you would use your whole entire hand. You would not point with the finger. You would just use your whole hand to, gesture towards a person if you were pointing out something. Slapping your fist into your hand, like I know we do that sometimes. I've seen it done in business meetings. Someone's like, ah. Well, to them in Dubai and UAE, that is a sexual gesture, and so it's not something that you would want to do in a social or business setting because it would be seen as highly inappropriate. The next thing is do not turn your fingers up this way when you're talking. They find that to be rude. So if you're a person that talks with your hands, essentially what I learned in these studies is that you want to be careful. You want to be very aware of what some of these things are that are offensive to them, and you want to be mindful of that in your communication. The other thing I thought was interesting that I learned was if you're doing business with someone and you're wishing to do business with a particular person, that you would sit within 1 foot of that person or closer. It shows them that you're interested, that you're, trying to build rapport with them. And that is very important in this culture, that you build personal relationships, build rapport with the people that you're going to be doing business with. So I found that to be very interesting that you would sit pretty close to this person. For verbal communication, they do, of course, have some verbal communication styles that were very interesting. One of the things I found is that they do not find like someone being quiet. So if you're kind of an introspective person or kind of an introvert, they would think something's wrong with you because they're looking for active engagement and conversation and discourse. They are looking for you to be present. And if you're too quiet or too reserved, they see that as you not being present or something is wrong. They speak very loudly. It may come off aggressively, but it's not aggression. It's really a sign of strength in their culture. Whereas speaking with a soft voice is a sign of weakness. So those are things you definitely want to be mindful of when you're in a business setting and trying to really maybe assert yourself or, be impressive to the people that you're doing business with. Another thing that is very big in their culture is hospitality. So if you're at a business location and maybe they set you up with an office or something and you might have snacks or something in there, if someone would come in to have a meeting with you or just come in to speak, then you would offer them some of the food or snacks that you have. Do not use language that makes the conversation feel hurried or makes them feel pressured. They are very casual in their meeting styles. So if you try to make them feel too pressured or you make them feel like you're hurrying the conversation along, that's offensive to them, makes them feel as if you're uninterested or you just want to get this over with so you can get them on their way. Swearing. It is actually a public offense. It's illegal in that country. And so that's something we would want to be mindful of because in Western culture, I know this just from being in numerous meetings every day, there are people in leadership that actually swear in meetings and it's not frowned upon in our culture. However, in that culture, it would not only be frowned upon, but it is actually illegal in some public settings. And then the other thing that I found interesting but not surprising was that they have a hierarchy for respect. So if there's someone who is sitting, in a higher position or they are an elder, then you would address them as such with Mr., Mrs., Doctor, what have you. And the other thing I thought was interesting that I did not know about this culture, lastly, was that in a lot of their business meetings and business settings, as well as socially, they talk about Allah a lot in their conversation. It's referenced a lot. He's referenced a lot, in terms of if they're talking about a particular subject, they might say, well, Allah would say whatever. And so that's referenced a great deal. So that's something I think you have to be mindful of, other people's religious beliefs, other people's culture, where that's incorporated into the way that they do business. I think that is important. So I did learn quite a bit from this discussion and the different topics that we had to study on, the videos and such. So hopefully you learned a little bit more about Dubai and their culture. And thank you so much, and I look forward to your questions.